Welcome to NP Student Magazine, where we're keeping you updated with every aspect of your life in and out of school. I am Dr. Patrice Little, and today we are continuing our conversation about nurses who are making a difference in celebration of Nurses Month. Joining us today is Dr. Celia McIntosh, the Chief Advocacy Officer at McIntosh Advocacy, and Consulting. Welcome, Dr. McIntosh. How are you?
Thank you, Dr. Little, for having me. I'm doing
So,
great.
let's get started into our conversation on how to start your advocacy journey. Can you tell us a little bit about your background as a nurse practitioner and your pathway to advocacy?
Great. Thank you. Great question. So, actually, I am a duly certified nurse practitioner in family health and psychiatric care. I became a nurse practitioner in 2011, and I went back to get my postmaster's as a psychiatric NP in 2018 because working in inpatient neurology for the last 10 plus years, I found that there was a huge overlap. So, that's currently where I work. In terms of my advocacy journey, it actually started before I became a nurse. The reason why I went to nursing school was because I wanted to advocate for patients and their families. I was a CNA at the time, so I decided to go back for nursing. But that journey didn't really start until 2014. I was actually walking into work when I found out about human trafficking for the very first time, and I could not unhear that, and that was really my call to action to do something about it. So my path was pretty, I knew that I wanted to advocate, but it really didn't mobilize and take action until 2014.
And was there a particular event that occurred, or is it just you hearing about human trafficking?
Right. So I just heard about it for the first time in 2014. I was walking into work. There was a table set up outside of a conference. And I walked over to the table because I saw I saw it say human trafficking. And I wondered, like, what was that? And the ladies that were sitting at the table started explaining it to me. And when they told me the horrific crimes that happen and how people are tricked and manipulated and forced to have sex with strangers, and maybe they get beat and their money taken, I could not, like, I was flabbergasted. So I wanted to learn more about it, started doing some research about it, and found out that 90% of victims come in contact with healthcare providers, but we had no idea. And I'd been to three different schools of nursing at that time, and I'd never heard of the concept of human trafficking. So I felt like if I didn't know anything about it, then a lot of my other nursing colleagues didn't. So that was my call to action to really start educating others. And since that time, I've educated over 6,000 individuals from nursing, social work, faith based organizations about human trafficking.
And you're absolutely right when you mention that we don't go into details with that in nursing school. There's quite a bit of things. The program is very rigorous, and really it's not enough time, or those things are not incorporated in the curriculum. So how does one start, like who's interested in learning about trafficking? How do they human trafficking? How do they get the information?
So typically, you would connect with a local organization, or Polaris Project is a formerly Polaris Project, now just Polaris is a big organization that has a lot of information about it for healthcare workers. There's Heal Trafficking. They have developed protocols for organizations. They have a lot of materials and do a lot of different research articles for that, for human trafficking. So I would say those would be some main organizations, but there should be some organizations within your own communities as well that they may start having that conversation, or just checking their website for that information.
And as an advocate, what do you specifically do? Is there steps that you take each day, or how do you go about bringing awareness about human trafficking to the nursing profession and educating us on how to really be a part of that solution of ending it?
Yeah, so great question. So for me, it's a matter of just really increasing awareness. Awareness is key. A lot of people don't know about human trafficking, so it's just giving them that first, bit of knowledge of, that it occurs in our 50 states. Like, for example, where I stay in New York, we have the fourth highest call volume. We talk about a lot of the red flags that are associated with it, what they may see as they're taking care of their patients, but it's just a matter of really starting to explain what it is. Why is it defined as human trafficking? What it looks like, and what do you do about it? So, just that really introductory conversation about it. Other things that I do, really creating PowerPoints, webinars, and going to different colleges and talking about the issue more broadly. So that's a lot of it. Other things I would say we have uh, done when with the organizations that I've connected with, we have put on kind of like proclamation days where every year we invite elected officials to come to these events to talk to them about human trafficking, to tell them what current legislation is, basically on the legislative session that may be impacting victims of trafficking, and really advocate for funding, because we know when programs run out and funding run out, then we often re-traumatize victims. So really just making sure that they're able to have sustainable life after leaving the trafficking life. So just mostly, like I said, educating providers, educating elected officials, and really just enhancing the knowledge about human trafficking.
So it sounds like that there are a variety of ways to go about advocating. It could be just bringing awareness, education. What about you also said raising funding to help them with their transition, but as they get reintegrated into just as a regular civilian in society. So let's go back to what you mentioned with elected officials, because you knew I was going to eventually go
Mhm.
there. So you have the proclamation. Usually, sometimes a legislator sponsors those proclamations. Is that correct? Is that how it happens in New York and the governor signs it?
So typically, yeah. So for us locally, it's our, county execs, it's our mayor, it's our, you know, um, city council representatives that we typically invite to those events. And they're hearing a lot of this throughout the year, but on this one specific day, January 11th, we have them come to these events. But yes.
Okay. And then, so my next question is, have you thought about one day becoming an elected official, or maybe working closely with one who's specifically sponsors? Because there's sponsors and co-sponsors with the bills for and when I say ending human trafficking, but you can correct me as far as what those types of bills actually are, but one of the bills that deals with human trafficking.
Yeah, actually, I've done some work with elected officials, because it's not just human trafficking that I do some advocacy around. I also advocate around issues of Black maternal health.
Okay.
There was, I was on the Police Accountability Board. So there's also issues around Daniel's Law, where there was a gentleman here that got murdered, and there was a law, that was passed for him. Worked on that bill. So when we think about specifically for human trafficking, one of the things that I would like to do is make, in some states, you have mandatory education for human trafficking, uh, and cosmetologists and nurses in some organizations, uh, through their state board, have to take like a couple hours of continuing ed, and I would like to make that mandatory, because oftentimes that's not something that is done in schools. If you don't have someone that's coming to these different colleges or these different schools talking about human trafficking, someone may not have that education. Whereas if they embed it into something that requires some, a mandatory continuing education, then that would be possible for them to have access to that information. So I would like to work with someone, elected official, to bring that to fruition.
That would be great. I would love to hear more about that. Feel free to share that with us as that dream becomes more realized, because we would definitely love to share to continue bringing awareness about the different types of laws as well as resources that come along with ending human trafficking. So let's change the direction a little bit. So we have quite a bit of viewers who are tuning in to what we have to say about starting your advocacy journey. And for you, you mentioned that you heard about human trafficking and it was something about it that called you. Can you share a little bit for those who are viewing how they can get started with their journey as far as where they should start and the next steps?
So I would say the one thing is you have to have passion about the issue. Okay, because it's going to be, when you have passionate about it, it doesn't seem like work. Okay, so I would say definitely pick something that you're passionate about. The next thing I would say is really understand the issue. How is it impacting you? How is it impacting your community or potentially your family? From there, I would say identify allies, and that may look like you being, connected with a professional nursing organization, and working with them to learn more about these different bills and advocate more collectively, or even learn the ropes, because oftentimes when you think about health policy, it's not a sexy topic, and advocacy is not necessarily sexy.
Correct.
So, really getting with organizations that have done this or have some kind of blueprint, I would say would be helpful. Maybe a advocate, someone that's doing health policy or teaches health policy, um, because maybe they can also show you the rope. Additional to that, then you want to develop a strategy. Once you know you have allies, other people that may be passionate and help you, elevate the voice of the issue, then developing a strategy. The one biggest thing, though, I would also say is figure out what your motives are, because oftentimes I realize that there are people that started with one kind of advocacy or plan in mind, and then their motives change. So you have to, figure out, am I still doing this for the individuals that are impacted, or am I just trying to get clout out of it? Am I just trying to get a name for myself? So you really have to reevaluate your motives. But initially starting out, have some passion about an issue, understand the issue and how it impacts your community, then go from there in terms of identifying allies, connect with different organizations that can work with you, show you the ropes, help you with the blueprint, and then really developing some strategies around that. And like I said, really making sure that you know your motives.
And so that's a good place for me to segue into the next question about characteristics, like the attributes. What type of attributes should one have who wants to be an advocate?
Well, I would definitely say you need to be balanced. Okay. Definitely balanced, because if you're very passionate about an issue, you will want to spend. I know for me, I want to spend a lot of time reading about human trafficking all the time. And and I'm being pulled in multiple different directions, with work and other things. I would say definitely looking at, having that humanistic element, understanding that that's a major factor. You can't be judgmental in this type of work, especially with human trafficking. Everybody's lives are different, understanding that everybody has a story, and oftentimes, you just can't think that one person is the perfect victim. So making sure that you're not having this biased attitude about people. And I think that will save you in the advocacy, but definitely being very passionate, having the time, um, really caring about, wanting to improve outcomes, improve health within your community, improve equity, accountability, many of those factors.
And one of the things I would like to add to that is that you can advocate for different types of causes or just areas of interest. And wanted for us to just go over quite a bit of examples, because sometimes people are like, okay, I want to start, I hear the steps on how to get started, but where do I go? Um, Sometimes the area may not call to you, sometimes, or like for instance, how it happened with you, sometimes it could be situations where just family members, and sometimes you got to be careful with that, because with
Mhm.
the you can get so engulfed into it that it can become overwhelming. What are
Right.
some other areas or different causes that they could advocate in?
So I would definitely say it really depends. Like, for example, mental health is a big area.
Mhm.
There was just something that came out today from the Surgeon General around social media and youth. There's been a
Yes.
huge uptick in mental illness, especially with youth. I would say, there could be, if you want to focus on animal cruelty, if you want to focus on climate control and environmental, if you want to just focus on developmental disabilities, there's a huge range. If you want to focus on autism, there's wildlife, there's many different ways that you can go about it. Or as a healthcare provider, you could say, hey, I want to focus on the healthcare disparities within systems. One of the other ways that I advocate is I also talk about workplace toxicity and really advocate for, nurses to, improve, emotional intelligence, because we know the detrimental impacts of bullying in those environments. So it really, the passions are, and just the degree of things people can advocate are very broad.
And as we were preparing for the interview today, I was looking through some additional ways, as in far as how we as nurses go about advocacy every day. We protect patients' rights. We connect our patients to resources. We promote equality and equity, as you mentioned earlier. Even just double checking for certain types of errors when it comes
Right.
to medication administration.
Mhm.
We help our patients have a voice. One of the things that I used to love to do when I was practicing is to teach my patients how to make informed decisions. It's like I'm giving you all of this education, and it may be reinforced by another nurse, but at the end of the day, it's up to you and for them to feel comfortable. I even wrote, I don't know if you saw it, an article about how it's okay to fire your provider.
Mhm.
And so it's important. That's a form of advocacy, just
Yeah.
letting people know what their rights are. So it doesn't have to be anything too elaborate where you're having to host a particular event, which I mean, those things are great, but it always starts with something small. And that's the purpose of us having this conversation today, is just to
Mhm.
plant a seed and just encourage you to take that next step into being an advocate. Because one of the things that is what we always like to say as nurses, as the number one trusted profession, people really
Yeah.
they trust us. So when we
Yeah.
say that it's okay, it's like, believe it or not, sometimes they feel like they need that permission, which we
Yeah.
they don't, but they just need that form of affirming. So this is great, Dr. McIntosh. I want to go into, we have about a minute left. So I wanted to end off, 'cause I had another question, but we got to get right into the one where I ask all of my guests at the very end. If I only knew then what I know now, what?
I would have leveraged my networks and not looked in the rearview mirror. Sometimes we get stuck looking backwards and saying, I wish I'd have got there sooner. If, I would have changed this. We have to stop looking in the rearview mirror. You have to cultivate the time that you have now, leverage your networks, because it's your network. So, if I would have leveraged my network, there's no telling where I would have been globally already. So, in terms of my advocacy journey, so I would say that would be one of the biggest things. There were nurses that were amazing that I didn't connect with because, I didn't feel empowered to do that. So I would say leverage your networks, stop looking in the rear view mirror, and the time is now.
That's a great advice, and actually it's something that I'm still learning myself, so I will apply that to my daily mantra. And for those who want to get in touch with you, maybe who are seeking mentorship on how to start their advocacy journey, what's a good email for you?
So you can connect with me at drnurse58@gmail.com.
Again, Dr. McIntosh, thank you for joining us. We would love to definitely have you on our show again in the future. Thank you to our viewers for tuning in for this past month. We want you to know that even though I couldn't interview all of you, I am aware that you are making a difference, and I encourage you to keep moving that needle forward so our patients could always feel safe and empowered. Thank you for tuning in to NP Student Magazine. I am Dr. Little, and I will see you next week.